Hey everyone, 99% of you watching aren't subscribed. Let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and at 1,000 subscribers, we'll drop special stories just for you.
Karen, 9 didn't exist on official maps. It drifted, half station, half asteroid carcass, caught in the gravity wake of a dead star. Ships found it only if they were looking for something they shouldn't, or if they had nowhere else left to go. Like me, the docking clamps groaned as my ship latched onto the outer ring. The hull vibrated, not from impact, but from the constant hum that seemed to seep through the entire structure. Karen, 9 was alive in the way a wound is alive, festering restless. I stepped out into recycled air that tasted faintly of metal and something sweetly rotten. Same as always. The corridor ahead stretched long and crooked, patched together from mismatched alloys. Light strips flickered overhead, some stuttering like dying stars, others glowing too bright. Unnatural, invasive. A pair of traders brushed past me, their voices overlapping in sharp, clicking syllables. One of them had too many joints in his arms. The other had none at all, floating slightly above the ground with faint hum. No one looked at me twice. That was the first rule here. Don't see, don't remember. I pulled my coat tighter and moved deeper inside. The market opened like a wound. Noise at first, layered, chaotic. Bargaining, shouting, mechanical chirps. Something that might have been laughter or might have been pain. The air shimmered with heat from overloaded generators and biotech stalls that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Cages lined both sides. Some were transparent, displaying their contents like trophies. Others were opaque, sealed tight, whatever was inside hidden for a reason. I didn't stop at any of them. Not at the insectoid creatures packed together in a writhing mass. Not at the crystalline figure that refracted light into impossible colors. Not even at the human kid sitting silently in a corner cage, eyes too empty for his age. I kept walking. You learn to do that. If you don't last long. I wasn't here for slaves. I told myself that more than once. I was here for parts, fuel regulators, maybe a new NAV core if I found one cheap enough. Something practical, something that didn't remind me of the past. But Karen, 9 didn't care what you came for. It showed you what you needed to see. The vendor stall didn't look different at first. Just another patchwork setup, rusted metal frame, flickering display screens, a few scattered containers filled with things I didn't want to identify. Then I noticed a crowd. Not large, just enough, and too quiet. People weren't bargaining. They were watching. That was unusual. Curiosity got the better of me. It usually did. I stepped closer. The cage hung from a magnetic rig above the stall, rotating slowly. At first glance, I thought they were dead. 3 bodies, suspended upside down, limbs hanging limp. Then one of them moved. Not much, just enough. My breath hitched before I could stop it. They weren't human, but they were close enough to make it uncomfortable. Their skin had a faint luminescence, like starlight diffused through water. Not glowing exactly, more like remembering how to glow. Their hair, if it was hair, drifted unnaturally, as if gravity had only partial claim over it. And the markings, thin, silver lines traced across their bodies, spiraling and branching in patterns that didn't look decorative. They pulsed faintly, in rhythm with something I couldn't hear, or maybe something I felt. They're alive, I muttered. Barely. A voice rasped beside me. I turned. The vendor stood half in shadow, his face a blend of flesh and machinery. One eye was organic, clouded, unfocused. The other clicked and adjusted, zooming in on me with mechanical precision. Fresh stock, he continued, pulled from beyond the veil. No registry, no classification. Species? He grinned. Unknown. Of course. Then how do you price something you don't understand? His grin widened. By how badly someone wants it. I looked back at them. The 3 girls. They were similar, but not identical. The smallest one twitched slightly, her fingers curling as if grasping for something that wasn't there. The second remained completely still, her expression unreadable. The third, she was awake. Fully. Her eyes were open, fixed on the crowd below, observing. calculating, waiting. And then she looked at me. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden movement, no signal, just a shift. But I felt it, like something had reached across the space between us and tapped directly against my thoughts. Recognition, not from her, from me. I frowned, taking an involuntary step closer. That one's aware, I said quietly. Most of them are, the vendor replied. Doesn't make them useful. Why hang them like that? He shrugged, metal joints whirring softly. Disorientation. Weakens resistance. Buyers prefer compliant merchandise. My jaw tightened. Yeah, I muttered, I bet they do. The girls gazed and leave mine. Even as the cage rotated slowly, even as other potential buyers shifted around us. She tracked me, unblinking. There was no fear in her eyes. No pleading. Just focus. And something else. Something I couldn't place. Not yet. Go on. The vendor prodded. You didn't come this far to just look. I exhaled slowly. He was right. Not about why I came, but about something else. You don't stop in a place like this unless something's already hooked into you. I didn't understand it. Didn't like it. But I couldn't walk away. Not this time. How much? I asked. The vendor chuckled. I was wondering when you'd ask. He tapped the control panel, and numbers flickered into view. Too high. Of course. 3 units, he added. Sold together. I only need 1. Then you need 3. I shot him a look. That doesn't make sense. He leaned closer, his mechanical eye narrowing with a soft whine. It does, if separating them kills them. I hesitated, looked back at the cage. The 3 of them, connected somehow. Even I could feel it now. Something subtle like a shared rhythm. Damn it. The awake one tilted her head slightly, still watching me, still waiting. And suddenly, I knew not what they were, not where they came from. But one thing, clear as a gunshot in vacuum. If I walked away, I'd regret it. Not immediately, not tomorrow, but eventually. And it would be the kind of regret that didn't fade. Stop, I said. The word cut to the noise around us, sharper than I intended. The vendor paused mid-motion. I reached for my credit chip. I'll buy them. For a fraction of a second, the girl's expression changed. Not relief, not exactly, but something shifted, like a piece of a puzzle, sliding into place. The vendor's grin returned, slow and satisfied. Of course you will. The cargo bay had never felt this crowded. Not because of space, there was plenty of that, but because of presence. 3 of them. And something about them pressed against the air itself, like the ship wasn't entirely built to contain whatever they were. I sealed the bay doors behind me and stood there for a moment, listening. No alarms, no movement, just a low, familiar hum of my ship and something else beneath it. A rhythm, faint, alive. The gravity snare cage hung where I'd left it, still humming softly. The field shimmered in uneven waves, distorting the shapes inside like heat over metal. They hadn't moved much, but they were awake now. All of them. 3 pairs of eyes followed me as I approached. No panic, no struggle, just that same unsettling awareness. All right, I muttered under my breath. Let's not make this worse than it needs to be. I moved the control panel and hovered my hand over the release switch. There was a moment, brief, sharp, where instinct told me to stop. Bad idea. Too unknown. Too risky. I ignored it. I'd ignored worse instincts before. The field disengaged with soft, collapsing whine. For a split second, nothing happened. Then gravity took over. They dropped. I flinched. Expected impact. Pain. Disorientation. But none of that came. They didn't crash. They unfolded. Mid-fall, their bodies shifted, fluid, precise, and they landed lightly on the metal floor, barely making a sound. Not even a stumble. Not weak. Not broken. Just restrained. Until now, I took a step back. Okay, I said slowly. That's new. They didn't respond. Didn't rush me. Didn't even spread out. They stayed close together, forming a loose triangle, subtle but intentional. Not defensive. Not aggressive. Coordinated. The smallest one glanced around the cargo bay. her head moving in short, sharp motions as if cataloging everything at once. The second remained still, her eyes half-lidded but focused, watching in a way that felt deeper than sight. And the third, she stepped forward. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't hierarchy, at least not in a way I understood. But the others shifted, just slightly, making space for her without breaking formation. She stopped a few feet away from me, close enough that I could see the details now. The faint shimmer beneath her skin, the way those silver markings pulse, not randomly, but in patterns, almost like breathing or communication. Easy, I said, raising a hand slightly. I'm not your enemy. The words felt hollow the moment they left my mouth. Her gaze didn't change, didn't soften, didn't harden either. It simply measured, then she moved her arm, just a small turn, but it changed everything. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. The marking along her forearm shifted with emotion, catching the light differently. A spiral, intersected by 3 jagged lines, burned into her skin, not etched, not painted, embedded, alive. My stomach dropped. No, I whispered. I took a step closer before I could stop myself. She didn't retreat, didn't react at all, just watched. Let me see. The memory hit like decompression. Sudden, violent, unavoidable. A battlefield under a fractured sky. The air thick with ash and static. Comms dead. Unit gone. Just me, bleeding out in the ruins of something that used to matter. I remembered the cold first. Not environmental, internal. That creeping numbness that starts at the edges and works its way inward, convincing you it's rest, convincing you to let go. And then, light, soft, impossible, something moving through the wreckage without sound. I never saw a face, never heard a voice, but I remember the feeling. Hands that weren't hands. Energy that didn't burn but rewrote. Pain undone. Flesh restored. Not healed. Changed. And before everything faded, I saw it, just for a second, that same spiral, that same pattern, burned into something that wasn't human. The present snapped back into place. I staggered, catching myself against a nearby crate. That was you, I said, breath unsteady. Or one of you. Silence. The 3 of them stood motionless, watching. I should have died, I continued, more to myself than to them. I was gone. There was nothing left to fix. I looked up at her. At least, nothing a human could fix. Her head tilted slightly. Not confusion. Recognition. You were there, I insisted. You saved me. For a moment, nothing happened. The ship hummed. The air felt too thick, too still. Then, something touched my mind. Not like a sound, not like a thought. More like pressure. Gentle, precise, and completely alien. You remember, I froze. The words weren't spoken. They didn't pass through my ears. They appeared, fully formed, inside my head. My pulse spiked. Yeah, I said hoarsely. I remember. A pause. Not empty. Processing. The 2 behind her shifted slightly, their markings pulsing in sync now. Faster, brighter. The air changed again. That subtle rhythm I'd noticed before, it grew stronger, closer. She stepped forward. 1 step. That was all. But it closed the distance between us in a way that felt significant. Few do. I swallowed. What are you? I asked. The question felt small, insufficient, but it was all I had. Another pause. Longer this time. Not hesitation. Selection. We are what remains. That didn't help. But something in the way she said it, it wasn't meant to. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. All right, I muttered. Guess I walked into something bigger than a bad decision. No response. Just that steady, unblinking gaze. I looked back at the marking on her arm, the one that had dragged a buried memory back to the surface, the one that had no business being here, on a slave market, on a station like Karen 9. What happened to you? I asked quietly. This time, the answer didn't come right away, but I felt it building, like pressure before a storm, or a door about to open. The answer didn't come as words. It came as impact, The moment I asked, the pressure in my mind shifted, tightened, and then everything else fell away. The cargo bay vanished. The ship, the hum of machinery, all of it gone. I was somewhere else. Not standing, not floating, just present, inside something that wasn't mine. Light, that was the first thing I understood. Not sunlight, not artificial. Something softer, alive in a way light shouldn't be. It flowed, not from a source, but through everything. Structures rose around me, impossible shapes, curve and layer like grown crystal, not built but cultivated. Surfaces shimmered with the same faint luminescence I'd seen in their skin. No edges, no decay, no noise. Peace, not the absence of conflict, the absence of the need for it. And them, not three, thousands, maybe more. Moving, not walking, not flying, but existing in motion. Their bodies shifted subtly as they passed through the space, their markings glowing in quiet, synchronized patterns. They didn't speak, but I could feel them, connected, every thought brushing against another, shared and understood without effort. No lies, no fear, no isolation. It hit me harder than any battlefield ever had, because I understood instantly what we had destroyed. The sky fractured. At first, it was just a ripple, a distortion in that perfect, flowing light. Then, fire. Ships tore through their atmosphere like wounds opening. Human ships, angular, brutal, built for function, not beauty, built for war. The peace didn't shatter. It collapsed. Panic, alien, unfamiliar, rippled through the network I was somehow inside. Not screaming, not chaos, but confusion, disbelief. They didn't understand what was happening. Not at first. Then the weapons hit. I felt it, not as an observer, as one of them. Energy tore through the structures, not just destroying, but unraveling. Matter didn't explode. It came apart, piece by piece, like reality itself was being peeled back. Where light had flowed, there was nothing, not darkness, absence. The connection around me broke. Not all at once, in pieces, chunks of awareness vanishing mid-thought, voices, if you could call them that, cut off without warning, gone. I staggered, even though I had no body there. No, I whispered, but it wasn't a protest. It was recognition. This wasn't a memory I was being shown. This was one I had helped create. We didn't know. I said, the words sounding weak even to me. The response came, not as a voice, but as a shift in the experience itself. You knew enough. The scene changed. Now I was closer. On the ground, or what passed for it. Smoke, ruin, fragments of those once living structures lay broken, dimmed. The light was fading, dying. And there, soldiers, human, armor marked with the insignia I used to wear. Weapons raised, scanning, securing. I saw myself. You never forget that, no matter how much time passes, no matter how much you try to bury it. I was younger, harder, eyes empty in that way you only get after too many orders and not enough questions. Targets are non-hostile, someone said over comms. I remembered that voice. Command says proceed with capture, another replied. Capture what? Someone else asked. They're not even fighting back. Doesn't matter. Orders stand. I watched as one of them, one of these beings, was restrained, not violently, just contained. They didn't resist, didn't understand, and I hesitated. That was the moment, the one they had shown me, the one that mattered. My weapon lowered, just slightly, just enough. Leave that one. I heard myself say, why? The squad leader snapped. Because it's not a threat, I answered. A beat of silence. Then, fine, move on. It had felt like nothing at the time. A small decision. A meaningless deviation in a war full of them. But now, I saw it differently. The scene shifted again. Faster now. Fragmented. Cages. Labs. Bright lights. Cold surfaces. Them, cut off from each other. Separated. Studied. Broken. I felt their confusion turn into something else. Not anger, not hatred, something deeper. Loss. The connection, the thing that defined them, was gone. And without it, they were alone. The weight of it slammed into me. I gasped, and the cargo bay snapped back into existence. I staggered, dropping to one knee, breath ragged. The metal floor felt too solid, too real, too small after what I'd just seen. They were a civilization, I said hoarsely. Not a threat, not an enemy. I stopped, couldn't finish it, didn't need to. Across from me, the three of them stood exactly where they had been, unmoved, watching. But now I understood the stillness. It wasn't calm. It was restraint. We were taken. The voice returned, clearer now, sharper, not louder, just closer, studied, divided, sold. My hands clenched against the floor. I didn't know it was as bad, I said. We were told. You were told what made it easier. I flinched, because that was true, too true. Silence stretched between us. Heavy, unavoidable. I can't fix that, I said finally. It came out rough, honest. I can't undo what we did. The smallest of the three shifted slightly, her gaze flicking between me and the others. The second one's markings pulsed, slow, steady. The marked one stepped forward again, closer than before, close enough that I could see the faint fractures in the glowing lines beneath her skin. Damage, not just physical, something deeper. No, a pause. Then, but you can choose what happens next. I looked up at her, really looked this time, not as cargo, not as something I bought, but as someone, something that had survived what shouldn't be survivable. What do you want? I asked quietly. This time, there was no delay, no hesitation, no searching for the right meaning. The answer came as one, from all three of them, perfectly aligned. Freedom. The word didn't echo. It settled. Heavy. Final. I let out a slow breath. Nodded once. Yeah, I said. That sounds fair. But even as I said it, I knew. Nothing on Karen. 9 was ever that simple. And whatever came next was going to cost me. The decision felt simple. That was the dangerous part. Freedom. I repeated, pushing myself back to my feet. All right, I can do that. Even as I said it, my eyes drifted toward the bulkhead, toward the ship systems, toward everything that could go wrong. Karen, 9 didn't deal in clean exits. Nothing left that station without someone noticing. And I had just walked away with something valuable. Something very valuable. They're going to come after us. I muttered, not fear, just fact. Behind me, the three of them didn't move, didn't question, didn't react. Of course they didn't. They already knew. I exhaled sharply and headed for the cockpit. Stay here, I said over my shoulder, then paused. Pointless. They weren't prisoners anymore. Or don't, I added. Just don't touch anything that looks expensive. By the time I dropped into the pilot's seat, my mind was already running through escape vectors. Docking clamps, manual override. Station traffic, heavy, unpredictable. Security response, fast, too fast. I brought the systems online. The ship responded like it always did. Reliable, worn, just barely holding together in the way I trusted more than anything brand new. Then something felt off. The console flickered. Just for a second, a soft ripple across the interface. I frowned. Don't start with me now. I muttered, tapping the panel. The flicker stopped. Everything stabilized. Probably nothing. Undocking sequence, manual override. I said, fingers moving across the controls. The clamps resisted. Of course they did. Come on. I growled, forcing the command through. There was a heavy clunk, then another. The ship shuddered as the clamps released. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the alarms hit. Sharp, loud, unmistakable. Yeah, I said under my breath. There it is. The console lit up with warnings. Unauthorized departure detected. Tracking signal active. Security response initiated. Tracking signal? I snapped, scanning the readouts. You've got to be kidding me. My eyes darted to the cargo skin feed. There, embedded in the cage rig, a tiny, blinking beacon. Insurance, I muttered. Smart bastard. I slammed a command into the system, trying to isolate the signal. Too slow. Way too slow. All right, I said, gripping the controls tighter. We're doing this the hard way. The ship surged forward, engines roar into life as I pushed away from the station. Karen. 9 filled the forward view, massive, jagged, alive with movement. And already, ships were launching. 3 of them. Fast. Armed. Of course it's 3, I muttered. Why not make it thematic? Weapons locks pinged across the console. Yeah, I see you. I veered hard to the left, skimming past a cluster of drifting cargo debris. The ship rattled in protest, hull scraping dangerously close to jagged metal edges. The first volley hit. Energy bolts tore past us. One grazed in the outer hull. Warning lights flared. Still holding, I said. Good. Stay that way. Another lock. Closer this time. I pulled the ship into a tight roll, diving toward the lower ring of the station, using its structure as partial cover. Too predictable. They've done this before. I muttered. Of course they had. A second volley. This one tighter. Smarter. One shot clipped the engine casing. The ship lurched. All right, I snapped. Now I'm getting annoyed. I adjusted power distribution, rerouting everything I could into thrust. Risky, but staying here was worse. I pushed the engines harder. Too hard. The ship groaned. And then something changed. The hum. It wasn't just the engines anymore. It was deeper, broader, like something else had joined the system. I froze for half a second. What did you do? I hadn't touched anything. Slowly, I turned. She was standing behind me. The marked one. I hadn't heard her enter, hadn't felt her move. The other 2 were just beyond her, their presence aligned, focused. We are helping. Her hand hovered over the console, not touching, just close. You might want to define helping, I said tightly, glancing back at the rapidly approaching ships. She didn't answer, not with words. She lowered her hand, and everything changed. The console didn't just respond. It adapted. Displays shifted. Interfaces reconfigured themselves in patterns I didn't recognize. Energy readings spiked, then stabilized in ways that made no sense according to any system I'd ever flown. What the hell? The ship wasn't just executing commands anymore. It was anticipating them. Routes appeared on the navigation display. Not plotted, suggested, impossible vectors. They'll tear us apart if we try that. I said, no, simple, certain. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then I made the choice. All right, I said, let's see what you've got. I followed the path. The ship accelerated, not forward, sideways. Space shifted, not visibly, not in a way I could describe. But I felt it, like the rules had bent, just slightly. The pursuing ships fired. The shots didn't miss. They passed through where we had been, even though, by all logic, we hadn't moved yet. What? The navigation display twisted again, offering another path. Tighter, sharper. I followed it. Reality folded. Just for a moment. Then we were clear. No alarms. No weapons locks. No ships. Just open space. I stared at the sensors. Nothing. No signal. No trace of pursuit. Karen, 9 was gone. Not behind us. Not ahead. Just gone. I let out a slow breath, my grip on the controls loosening. Okay, I said quietly. I'm officially out of my depth. Behind me, the 3 of them stood together. Not tense. Not guarded. Different. Free. Where are we? I asked. The marked one stepped closer, her presence no longer pressing. Just there, beyond where they can follow. That's not exactly a location. A pause. Then, it is enough. I leaned back in the seat, staring out at the unfamiliar stars. They didn't look wrong. Just not mine. Figures, I muttered. Silence settled in the cockpit. Not uncomfortable. Just quiet. After a moment, I glanced back at them. So I said, what now? The 3 of them shifted slightly, their markings pulsing in a slow, unified rhythm. For the first time, it didn't feel alien. It felt intentional. Now you choose. I let that sit for a second. Then I huffed a quiet laugh. Yeah, I said, seems like I've been doing that a lot lately. I looked back out at the stars, at the endless, unknown stretch ahead. I could go back, find another job, another war, another way to forget. Or I could do something different, something that actually mattered. I exhaled. All right, I said, and for once, I meant it. Let's find your home. The response wasn't a voice. Not exactly, but I felt it. Warm, not forgiveness. Not yet, but something close. And as the ship turned toward a future I didn't understand, for the first time since the war, I wasn't running. I was going somewhere.